Okay, this is problem 3, which is very similar to problem 2. It's another payoff matrix showing profits of two pizza places, depending on whether they decide to advertise or not. So we're going to have a series of questions. I don't think I'm going to go over all of these because you should be able to do most of this on your own, assuming that you now have a pretty clear idea of how a payoff matrix works. But I am going to do a little bit because it's got some tricky parts to it, and I want to make sure that you understand exactly how this should go. So anyway, part A here is asking, well, first of all, when you're doing these, it's very important to know what the first entry is. So, and it's normally always the company on the left is going to be sort of a horizontal part of the matrix, and then the second entry is going to be the vertical, which is coming from the top down, the top company. So it's always easier to color code this, I think, which I've done here, so you can see that pie crust their profits are in the blue and La Pizza's are in the red. Okay, so what do we need to know here? So it's asking us what strategy should pie crust choose if La Pizza chooses to advertise. So this is pretty easy because if we know what the other firm is doing, then it's pretty simple to decide what we want to do. So if we know that La Pizza is going to advertise, so we know that La Pizza is here, either here or here, well, it's very simple, easy for pie crust to say, well, if I have a choice between 250 and 180, well, that's easy. I'm going to choose $250 in a profit. So if La Pizza advertises, I am going to, as pie crust is going to say to itself, so am I. So that's easy. Okay, now we need to, they're asking us, is there a dominant strategy for La Pizza? So once again, this is tricky because we want to look at comparing what would happen whether they decided to advertise, which is here, or not advertise, which is here. But what we're actually comparing is, would they be better off regardless of what pie crust does? So if they decide, so if we say, well, if La Pizza says we're going to advertise, then they would be better off if, well, and then, let me just say it another way. Easier to think of it like this. If they look at from the perspective of the other firm, what if pie crust says we're going to advertise? Then the choice for La Pizza is to not, because not for them is better than advertising. 300 is higher than 200. Okay, so in this case, if pie crust decides to advertise, then La Pizza should not. But what if pie crust decides not to advertise? Then La Pizza should advertise. So they would change. So they don't have a dominant strategy because they're going to be, they're not going to have. There's no strategy that would be good for them, regardless of whether pie crust advertises or not. They would be better off not if they do, and better off doing if they don't. So that tells us that La Pizza does not have a dominant strategy here. Okay. All right. Now part C. Okay. In the Nash equilibrium, determine the following: the profit for both of these firms. So we need to figure out, well, first of all, we need to ask, we know that La Pizza doesn't have a dominant strategy, but does pie crust have a dominant strategy? So now we're comparing, whether they would be better off regardless of what La Pizza does. So let's say that pie crust says, okay, what happens if La Pizza decides to advertise? Well, we'd be better off advertising, because if they're here, we would be better off jumping up to here, right? What if they decide not to advertise? Well, if they're going to be, what if La Pizza decides not? So we know if we are pie crust, we know if La Pizza decides to advertise, we should also advertise, because 250 is better than 180. If La Pizza decides not to advertise, they're going to be either here or here, we're still better off advertising. So 450 is better than 390. So we're gonna decide. So pie crust has a dominant strategy. They should advertise, because they're going to be better off than not either way, right? 250 is better than 180, and 450 is better than 390. So they're going to decide to advertise, and if they do that, then La Pizza can either be here or here, and obviously 300 is better than 200, so we're going to end up right here. So our Nash equilibrium is going to be $450 profit for pie crust and $300 profit for La Pizza. So when you're trying to find, in these situations, when you're trying to find Nash equilibrium, you're going to need to determine which of the firms has a dominant strategy, and then go there. And then once you've done that, which in this case it's advertise for pie crust, so you know they're going to be here or here, then once we know that La Pizza is going to choose their best option from their choices if pie crust advertises, and that's going to be 300, because 300, so they're going to not advertise, because $300 profit obviously is better than 2. Okay, better than 2. All right, so that takes care of that. Now we need to look at what happens when, now this is why I'm kind of going over this whole thing, because it's tricky. Suppose that advertising cost increase. So advertising cost increase $60 a day. So that's going to make advertising $60 more expensive. So what does that mean you do with your matrix? A very easy mistake to make would be to add. Since you see this word right here, increase, it'd be very easy to say, oh, I just need to add $60 to the profits for advertising. No, it's the opposite, right? It's the opposite, because if you increase cost, then your actual profit is going to decrease by $60. So your matrix should look, if we compare it, whoops, let me go back. Let me move this over here. I should have grouped that. Let me go back. Boom, like that. Come down here. Group that. Okay, so if we bring this up, we can see that where we're advertising here, see, we're actually, since the cost has gone up by 60, our actual profits, see, these numbers are our profits. So our profits are actually going to go down, here and here, see, and then here and here are going to drop where each of the firms are advertising. And I believe that's all there is for problem 3. Yeah. Okay.